Normaline would like to welcome you to creating karma, or I'm sorry, understanding karma to create the future we all want. I think that's some pretty awesome information we need to learn about. Eddie Peet is here to give us this knowledge. He's been hanging out at LTC since 1997. And if you haven't taken his course before, he really gets into the nitty gritty and makes it understandable. So thanks, Eddie.
Okay, thank you, Shayla. And hi, everybody. Welcome along to the next part of the program. I think let's begin by doing a short breathing meditation. Then we'll set our motivation and take refuge together and generate a mind of enlightenment. So please get comfortable in your seat. So just ensure your back is straight, your shoulders are relaxed, and your hands are placed in a comfortable position. And allowing the body to breathe itself. Become aware of the movements that take place whenever you inhale or exhale. And allow everything to slow down, allow everything to settle down. And feeling at ease, allow the body to breathe itself. And feeling at ease and relaxed, imagine that in the space in front of you appears Shakyamuni Buddha, your spiritual mentors, the teachers of the lineage, and meditational deities. While surrounding you at the level of the ground appear all sentient beings. And these include your parents, other family members, and people you feel close to. There are also strangers and people who've had misunderstandings and difficulties with. What we have in common is the wish to be happy and the wish to be free from suffering. And though we have these natural wishes, they haven't been accomplished yet. And this is primarily because our behavior is out of whack. We want to be happy, yet we do the things that prevent that. We want to be free from suffering, but our activities actually lead us into suffering. So we need to change our behaviors if we wish to have a long-lasting, stable form of happiness. and to be free of the hindrances and obstacles to that. By relying upon the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas in front of us, we can accomplish our aims. Now, as we are no different than all the people surrounding us, our aim should not be just for ourselves alone. It should include the people surrounding us. So I think that you wish to develop your wisdom and your compassion and every other skill you have to bring about your own welfare and the welfare of all beings who surround you. And that's possible to do by relying upon those who've actually done that, upon their teachings and upon them as a community. So decide to take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, like I said, to accomplish our own happiness and the happiness of others. And to formalize that, we can take refuge, generate a mind of enlightenment by reciting this prayer 3 times. So if you just join me, saying, I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Now, to stabilize our aspiration and to make it stronger, recollect the 4 immeasurable thoughts of immeasurable loving kindness, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable joy, and immeasurable equanimity. So wishing to develop these thoughts yourself to help others do the same. And with this wish, think now that light and nectars flow out from the heart of the Buddha and they wash over you. And they remove all hindrances to these 4 immeasurable thoughts and behaviors. If your mind stream has been transformed, and in fact, the mind streams of all beings, everyone surrounding you, everyone has these 4 immeasurable thoughts within their mind stream now. And being free of all these hindrances, see yourself being prepared to prostrate before the refuge field, to make offerings, confess, and rejoice, and so forth. So reciting along with me the 7-limb prayer. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginning this time and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of others towards the great enlightenment. And now to free ourselves of the last hindrances to clinging to false ideas of who we are and the merit as being truly existent, we can make a mandala offering. So reciting along with me, this ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offered. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamnayatayami. We've released the offering. It's been accepted by the Buddha. He looks at us and smiles at us with delight. And we look up at him and look into his eyes. And we feel accepted and at ease. And then an emanation of the Buddha leaves his heart, moves through space, and comes to abide above the crown of your head, facing in the same direction you are. The emanation descends, entering your skull, coming down through your body to rest at the level of your heart, whereby its radiance begins to expand, filling your body and mind with light. And the light goes out through the pores of your skin and fills the 10 directions of space. And ideas of self and other, inner and outer, have vanished. In the knowledge that these are just mere thoughts. I think how wonderful it is that you've established all beings who need space to abide. You've established each one of them into an enlightened state, a state of full awakening, which is no different than your own state. And then the light begins to withdraw from the 10 directions of space. It re-enters your heart. And you feel embodied, sitting on your seat, breathing normally and naturally. And you acknowledge that this has all taken place on the level of imagination. Yet it's placed a propensity within the mind to bring about this full awakening for the benefit of others. So again, just reaffirm that intention, awakening for the benefit of others. And this study is to help you and I do that. Now breathing in deeply through your nostrils. Exhale forcefully through your mouth. And allow your eyes to blink and to flutter open. And to be present in your seat. Okay, once again, welcome everybody. And let's have a look at what we covered last week. So we looked at karma, and we know that in general it means action, and the Buddha changed it to really mean sort of actions of intention. And whether one believes in karma or not, karma exists. And as I said before, it's really about the intentions, and the intentions drive the actions. So actions are made up of parts, they are produced, therefore they require causes and conditions. And we looked at some of the causes last week. We looked at substantial causes, and these types of causes turn into their effect. And then we looked at conditions, and conditions actually support the effects. Now, today we're going to have a look at, first of all, virtue and non-virtue, and then the four principles of karma. And finally, we're going to have a look at an analogy, the analogy of the seed and the tree, and show how this relates to these four principles of karma. Now, to present the material, I've relied upon these books. So you see they're slightly different than last week. Practicing the Path here by Kyabje Rinpoche was based on a lamb rib course that he taught in April of 2000. And it has material in there on karmic cause and effect that you don't find in other books. So that's why I've sort of put it up there. In fact, all of these books have cover areas that the other books don't. And that's why I sort of have to rely on quite a wide variety of teachings. The foundation of Buddhist practice by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Tibetan children, in-depth, wide, and easily understandable. The Four Noble Truths by Geshe Lobsang Gyatso and the previous book are both very good because they have some charts in there. And I like to see information condensed down to a table or a chart. Steps on the Path to Enlightenment. This whole book is on karma, so it's over 300 pages long, but it's written in a really conversational style. It's easy to understand, and it's in depth. Once again, Buddhism by the Dalai Lama and Tibetan children. Again, quite in depth. What's good, very good in here is the discussion of what they call seeds and imprints. So once you sort of get into this into a bit of in depth, these terms will come up and you'll start to wonder what's a seed, what's an imprint, what makes them different than one another. And this last book, Healing Emotions, has got a terrific section on virtue, especially the development of virtue within Western culture in the Western historical period. And there's a lot of material there I had no idea about. And I always feel sort of it's refreshing to read material that I don't know about, and to have it written so well and clearly. So again, and there's very good discussion here of emotions and what we mean by them in the West and what the Buddhists mean. And I think you'll all like that. Once again, very easy to read and enlightening in a way, it sort of wakes you up, especially about virtue. So this is the material I basically relied upon for today's class. And also I'll begin the course today with a quote from the Abhidharma. So as you can see, it says here, karma that yields happiness is virtuous karma. Karma that yields the unhappiness of suffering is non-virtuous karma. The other karma, which creates a neutral feeling, is the other neutral karma. Right, so we've got like three types of feeling here, associated with probably three types of activity and 3 types of karma. So first, I'd just like to say a little bit about virtue, and present it from the sort of the Pali perspective. So this is like the original Buddhism, the foundation for the Mahayana.
Eddie, just stop the share while you're reading a bit.
Okay. Stop share. So from a psychological and spiritual viewpoint, virtue is spiritually and psychologically healthy and beneficial. From an ethical perspective, it's commendable. And from the standpoint of its cause, it's not produced under the influence of gross defilements. So the defilements are things like anger, lust, pride, the different types of afflictions. So virtue is not produced by those. That's what I'm saying. And from the perspective of its result, it leads to fortunate results. So again, we've got a number of viewpoints here: psychological and spiritual viewpoint, the ethical perspective, cause and result. And then they also, in the Pali commentaries, they also explain some of the nuances of non-virtue. So again, from the psychological and spiritual viewpoint, non-virtue indicates something that is psychologically or spiritually unhealthy. From an ethical perspective, it is censured and looked upon with disapproval. From the standpoint of its cause, it's produced by defilements, like those ones I mentioned. And from the viewpoint of its result, it produces suffering. And basically, that's what that sort of quote, sort of summed up. I just want to bring out to you the psychological and spiritual viewpoints and the ethical perspective, because that might not be so clear within the quote. Griffey?
Yeah, Eddie, it really becomes clear that it's not that someone's just deciding this is good or bad, with arbitrary rules or being judgmental, but it's like a really more organic kind of process of looking at it from these perspectives.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So this material was taken from the Foundation of Buddhist Practice by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Venerable Thupten Chodron, this material, on page 235. So this is just sort of like to give you an idea of what how virtue and non-virtue is seen from the point of view of the foundational vehicle. So there won't be any difference between this and the Mahayana. Well, there might be a slight difference, but not very much. And that's why I want to put it like from the foundational point of view. So now we're going to have a look at virtue a little bit more deeply and non-virtue. So I'll just get back to the screen share. So again, karma that yields happiness is virtuous karma. Karma that yields the unhappiness of suffering is non-virtuous karma, and there's neutral karma also. So the definition of virtue: it's a phenomenon that functions as a main cause of happiness. Nice and simple, isn't it? So if you ever find yourself very happy, you'll know that what's produced is virtue.
So Eddie, this is like working it back, isn't it? So
yeah,
anytime that we're happy, it necessarily has to have come from virtue.
Virtue. Yeah. And so now there are 5 types of virtue. And after this one, we'll do defining non-virtue, and there'll be 5 types of non-virtue. And it just gives you a deeper way of looking into these phenomena called virtue and non-virtue. So again, I'll just stop the share and talk about these 5 types of non-virtue. So first of all, there's a type of virtue, so I call it natural virtue. So natural virtue, we can say, well, it includes 11 virtuous mental factors. So we have the mind itself, the main mental consciousness, and that mental consciousness is supported by different, what they call mental factors. And they're just factors that make up this phenomenon called mind. But then we have others called virtuous mental factors and non-virtuous mental factors. And there are a lot of non-virtuous mental factors, but there's been like 11 virtuous ones sort of singled out. So I'll give you an example of some of them. So faith is seen as a virtuous mental factor. And there are different types of faith. What's another one? A sense of shame is seen to be a virtuous mental factor. So oftentimes we might think that shame is not virtuous. Actually, in fact, when we feel ashamed, we feel badly often. But a sense of shame is sort of telling you, we know ourselves, we've done something like wrong, something that's caused suffering in some way. There's a recognition of that, and that's called shame, and that's a good thing. The other one is called, a consideration for others is a virtuous mental factor, and that's often, someone's given the name embarrassment. 3 that are not so hard to forget is non-ignorance, non-attachment, and non-hatred. So there are 6 there. I'll just give you the last 5. Sorry?
Eddie, I was just thinking that one of the consideration for others, or sometimes called embarrassment, we often relate to it in Australia as like a sense of fairness. Like we kind of instinctually know if something's fair or unfair as well.
Okay, yeah, maybe. I'm not so sure, but perhaps.
Like in terms of behavior, if people are being mistreated, or that's the sense of a fair go.
Saying here, we don't wish to embarrass the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, have them feel embarrassed, I guess. Also, so what I was saying, so shame is like an inner thing, right? It's primarily concerned about, like us, like we know we're in the wrong about this. So for instance, this is now for embarrassment. So, the people that come here know that I teach the Buddha Dharma. And then, sometimes myself and the students go up for lunch after class. So just suppose that we're sitting there and a mosquito lands on my hand and starts to suck some blood out. And then I just go like crash. Just kill it like that. So then I know that my students are sitting there and watching this, see this. And what they would feel about that. Just like Shannon's eyes are going like that. You go, yeah, that's right. Right. So I'm sitting there knowing that this sense of embarrassment. So this is once again a good thing. So I remember when I first came across these terms, when I was much younger, and I was little difficult to be around, I decided I would never feel ashamed of what I did because it just felt so terrible. I remember, once I'd done something bad and acknowledging it was just hurt. And I decided I'm not going to allow myself to feel that again. Whatever I do, that's not going to happen. So what happened, of course, is that, you know, my behaviors sort of become quite extreme, and you don't really care. You know, you don't pay attention to what's happening inside in your heart. Yet when I came along, when I read this, first of all, I changed my mind. I was like, oh, so that's actually a good thing. The feeling of hurt that I feel in here when I hurt somebody else or do something bad, it's telling me, don't do this. You're hurting yourself, and that's the signal.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense, Eddie, and it's quite different from being shamed or being belittled by others. This one really comes from within, doesn't it? So it's your own sense.
And I think, you know, so I sort of mixed it up about like feeling, as you put out, when others make you feel ashamed of yourself in some way. So it was great to read this and then sort of break it down and going, oh, okay, this is a little different. There's a sense of, you know, there's something inside us that knows, you know, and shame is this mental factor that's letting you know. So there are others, of course. There's effort, what they call mental suppleness, conscientiousness, equanimity, and finally non-harmfulness. But like I said, there are 11 of them, and you can read about these if you get a book that deals specifically with the mind in the Buddha Dharma. They're quite common there because, like I said, you know, like virtue is the root of happiness. So you need to know, well, what is virtue and what are they? So we have these natural virtuous mental factors. Now there's another, the next one is called virtue by association. So when you have this mental factor like shame, for instance, or faith, that affects your main mind. It affects your whole consciousness. Right? So it's associated with the main mind. And so what happens is the whole mind becomes suffused with that mental factor. So the mind, for instance, becomes a mind of faith, but it depended upon the mental factor of faith before the mind could become the mind of faith, or the mind of conscientiousness, depending upon the mental factor. The next virtue is called virtue by motivation. And so these are the virtuous actions that follow from being faithful, from having a mind of faith, the mind of shame, and so forth. The fourth is called virtue by subsequent relation. And these are the imprints left on the mind by, you know, those virtuous mental factors and the actions that follow. And finally, it is called ultimate virtue. And the ultimate virtue is what I call nirvana. So it's the true cessation of the negative mental factors. So I'll give you an example here of using the action of making a prostration with faith. And so faith is the natural virtue, isn't it? Yeah, so we go. So the mental factor faith is a natural virtue. Then the primary mind and the other factors associated with it, such as feeling and discrimination, are virtues by association. So like I said, the main mind, all the factors become associated with this virtue of faith. Then the bodily action of prostration is a virtue by motivation. The virtuous imprints left on the mental continuum by the mind of faith and the action of prostration are virtues by subsequent relation. And finally, nirvana is the ultimate virtue, because when we attain nirvana, we experience ultimate happiness. So I know when I do these presentations like that, it's like a whole lot of information just coming at you, isn't it? It's like a barrage of it. So please don't, I know that it's not all that comfortable. Just sort of accept it, go, okay, I'm just getting my toes dipped, and I can have a look at the other books that he's talked about before, and take my own time and try and work it out, because it does take time. It does take you sitting there and playing around with it before you can sort of get it.
Actually, Eddie, it's really nice to hear those different things, because it sorts out the different aspects rather than lumping it all together and you somehow know, hang on, there's different aspects here, like an action's different from an intention. To actually spell it out, especially those ones virtue by association, it's actually really nice to hear.
Well, I just want to let you know that things appear quite simple on the surface, and then you dive in and the simplicity vanishes. You find everything's made up of all these parts, and they've all got names, and you have to sort of put it all back together, and then it looks all simple again. So it's like this all the time, So let's have a look now at non-virtue. Let me see. We're going to do the screen share. So remember, a phenomenon that functions as the main cause of happiness, and non-virtue is a phenomenon that functions as the main cause of suffering. So nice and simple like that. Like I said, so what, like I said before, we all want to be happy, and none of us want to suffer. And non-virtue is the primary cause, it's the main cause of suffering, whereas virtue is the primary cause for happiness. So what I would, over time, like take away these simple definitions and then put what you understand into action. In other words, restrain yourself from doing the things that harm you and harm others. Do the things that produce more happiness for yourself and more happiness for others. So again, there are these 5 types of non-virtue, and I'll give you an example, and the example here will be killing the insect. So again, let's just do the stop the share for a moment. There are natural non-virtues. So these are the ones I think most of us are familiar with, as they're sort of very common when you common to come across when we start paying interest in Buddhist study and being a Buddhist. Right? So we have things like what they call the 6 root and the 20 secondary delusions. Sometimes I say there's 48,000 delusions. So these are the non-virtues, the 48,000. Then they crunch them all down, and sometimes there's 20 of this and 20 of that. Then you can drive them down into 6, and finally sometimes 3. And like I said, from the 6 arise the 20. So there are a lot of them. And I think they're presented like that in many ways so that we've become quite familiar with what hurts us, what harms us and others. And so we can find, like, just restrain yourself from doing them. So like I said, so we've got desirous attachment, sometimes called lust. We have anger, hatred. We have jealousy, doubt, pride, and then all the others that come out from those 6. So these are called the natural non-virtues. This we had natural virtue, now we've got natural non-virtue. Then we have non-virtue by association. So once again, once you have like the natural non-virtue, for instance, of hatred arises, then the feeling of hatred comes on. You are discerning the person as an enemy or somebody that needs to be harmed. So everything now supports this mental factor, this non-virtuous mental factor. And then you can have what they call a non-virtue by motivation. So here are the non-virtuous actions of body and speech that could follow, and the mind itself. You could have the mind of hostility, for instance. the non-virtue by subsequent relation, then that means just the imprints left on the mind by those non-virtues and their actions. And
Eddie,
finally,
there's a question here from Sue. So what does natural refer to when you're talking about, natural virtue or natural non-virtue? What is it that makes it natural?
So I've wondered about this myself, Sue. So I think it's just the term that they use to go, like, if you do this, it's naturally non-virtuous. Like if you kill if you take, it naturally leads to this effect. So it's naturally harmful, non-virtuous.
Is it because, say, naturally people don't like their stuff being stolen, animals don't like their food being stolen? It's not something that we have a belief in. It's not a cultural thing. It's really instinctual.
Yeah,
like that.
It's sort of like,
is that
like by nature? You hurt somebody by nature. They're hurt and they don't like it. It's natural. I think that's about it, Sue, in terms of what they mean by natural here. So the ultimate non-virtue is samsara. So it's using the example of killing an insect out of anger. So this mental factor, anger, is a natural non-virtue. Naturally brings harm. It creates harm. So the primary mind and all the other mental factors associated with it, such as feeling, become non-virtues by association. The bodily action of killing is a non-virtue by motivation, and the imprints left on the mental continuum by the mind of anger and the action of killing are non-virtues by subsequent relation. Samsara is the ultimate non-virtue because the contaminated aggregates are the ultimate origin of all suffering. Yeah, so you can see here the simple act of just squishing an insect because you don't like them or maybe a little bit fearful of them or something like that. It's not so simple. I mean, it's simple doing it, but there's a lot behind it. And then there's a lot in front of you. So like they often say, like karma is like it's a hidden phenomena. And so like I said, so most of the stuff that drives us to act is hidden from us. And then the results are often in the future, so they're also hidden from us. So we've got to sort of use the teachings of the Buddha and our own mind to infer a lot and decide, okay, this seems to make sense to me. I need to restrain myself from the non-virtuous side and engage in the virtuous side. So there's a lot in this, isn't there? Just in finding out what virtue is, what it's not, and finding out these different types and so forth. Okay, so let's go on now. We'll have a look now at the second part of the teaching, what we call reflecting on karma, like in general. So this topic has basically 4 sections. And the first is called the certainty of karma. So we're talking about the general characteristics of karma, and these are going to provide us with a basic framework to understand karma and its effects. So the first is, of course, the certainty of karma. The second is the magnification of karma. The third characteristic is that we don't experience the effect of an action that you did not do. And lastly, the actions you have done do not naturally perish. So what I'm going to do is basically have one slide up talking a little bit about it, and then a meditation slide. And so I'll just briefly take you through the meditation, then you can look at it on screen. So this first one, that karma is certain, or what they often call definite. You might have heard that karma is definite, but really, karma is certain. So what's certain about it? What is definite about it? Now this is what could be misunderstood. So oftentimes when we hear that it's certain or it's definite, we think it means, if I do this, this is definitely going to happen to me, or it's certain that this is going to happen to me. And that's not what it means. But that's sometimes when you hear it, that's what you think. If I do something bad, it's certain something bad is going to happen to me. But karma is definite, or that karma is certain. The certainty is this, is that happiness comes from previously created constructive actions, and suffering comes from previously created destructive action. That's what's certain about it. And it never occurs the other way around. So it's never the case that you do a constructive action and something terrible happens to you. The result is something really terrible. Or that you've done, or you experience a great deal of suffering, and you can go back and say, that's because I did this really good thing. That it's never that way, right? It's positive leads to positive, negative creates the negative. That's what's certain about karma, and that's what's definite about it. Now, another thing that might happen to us when we hear this, and this too is not uncommon to happen. And this is that when we hear that negative karma is bad and virtuous karma is good, there's a sense of inherency about that, how our mind is holding those terms. So an action is not inherently good or bad, but it's designated or virtuous as virtuous or neutral in relation to the result it brings. So this is, as you can see, it's like you got to get the result first, and you go back and go, okay, suffering, negativity, happiness, positive karma, and that's how you can discern. Yeah, if you think about this, it's like, when we create actions in the moment, it's like, if you ask yourself, what determines that action I've created in the moment is virtuous or non-virtuous? It's the motivation. Right, so this is why it's really important to sort of, we can use this present life and look at what we experience and go backwards and call, you go, okay, that must have been because of virtuous karma or non-virtuous karma. But when we come back to right where we are, we're going to create actions. Take the time to set in place the motivation, get a good motivation going, because that's the creation of the karma there. And if you don't do it deliberately, the mind will just do it itself. But if you're habituated to poor behaviors, bad behaviors, what they call destructive behavior, then that's the direction the mind will take you. So just please, just slow down a bit and decide your intention. Make your intention. Okay, so here we go. Karma is definite, right? So it says, so here's a little bit from a sutra. It says, as in planting, happiness and misery are effects from the deeds performed. How can a bitter seed yield a sweet fruit? Seeing this universal truth, the wise should think. Evil doing brings painful effects, while good deeds always lead to peace and happiness. So in other words, happiness comes from previously created constructive actions, suffering from its opposite, and it never goes the other way around. So like whenever we begin these classes and whenever we finish them, like we set our intentions. We bring to consciousness our motivations for being here, which is great. It's a good thing to do. But then this class will finish, and then we're going to go out and live our lives, right? Do a whole lot of things, act in other ways. Again, I think it's a very good idea to decide for yourself, what am I, how am I going to, what's the purpose of my life? What am I meaning to do today? Like at least set that down, and then away you go. And you can, like I said last week, when I go and do the, make a donation to the blind person in the West End, I actually have to stop and reset my motivation. Otherwise, I'll just put the money in and think, oh, great, it's going to the Blind Foundation, and that's it. So it's like, wow, I could have done so much more with that simple action. That's an activity of generosity, but I didn't use it very well. So I know I have to slow down. So you might have to too, and don't worry about it. Slow down. Deliberately do actions that you know will bring about good effects long term. So here's a
Eddie, I have a question.
Yep, sure.
I have a question. I hear all you're saying, and I agree with all of that. But what about the concept of innocent victims, or like being in the wrong place at the wrong time? Like there are people who may have done very virtuous actions.
Sure.
Maybe their whole life, maybe just before something horrible happens to them.
Yeah.
Caused by the negative actions of another, and they are the recipient of it. And maybe, I'm thinking of a situation in war where a bunch of people suffer. They didn't create that bad karma for themselves. I don't see how they did.
Yeah, so this is I can say the answer is sort of simple, but it's not simple to work out. This sort of unable to work things out, or difficulty working things out, arises in dependence upon not knowing how a person exists. You can find out how a person does exist, though. That's the wonderful thing, right? So you're quite right. The person of this life did not create the negative actions that produce these unforeseen sufferings of this life. It was the person of a previous life. Now, if you say, so was it the person of this life was the person who did it last life? We go, no. No. So, like I say, Sue, the thing here is to find out how does the person actually exist? So we know that the person and the I are synonyms. And the I has a type of existence that you could call in general, and specific. We could say in general, the person who experiences the suffering in this life is a good person. It was the I of a previous life that created an action that brought about this result. Now I put up there's a Buddhist group that I belong to online, and I put up this material. But I can tell you that the best book you can get to read about this, and I'm sure you'll get it. And like I said, this is not an uncommon difficulty that for us to get our heads around. In fact, we've had many students here, it's the same sort of difficulty. But the thing is, it's like, who is the person that created these actions to produce these effects? Like, who or what? How does this person exist?
And
So,
also, Eddie, it's that plus the who is the person, and that person didn't do it on purpose to create suffering. They did it out of ignorance and confusion.
Yeah, karma and delusion has driven them to do an action, and it produces its result if it's not purified. So Sue, the best book I could give you this is called Insight into Emptiness. It's by a great teacher called Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Yeah, thank you, Sue. And there's a section in there called the general I and the specific I. It asks, who is the person that goes from life to life? And yeah, if you get your head around that. So the idea here is a person is merely imputed to consciousness. Have a look at it, and I think this will really settle the whole idea down. Then you'll get it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So let's have a look here at the what do you call it? The meditation. So we'll just go through line by line. So first of all, this is like what do you call it? A reflection. Right? So painful feelings are the effect of previously accumulated non-virtuous karma. Then painful feelings arise from compatible causes. And this is what we talked about last week, substantial causes. Painful feelings do not arise from incompatible causes. It is impossible for painful feelings to be the effect of virtuous karmic causes. So in other words, Sue, when we call people who are good people, who do good things in this life, all that we've known them for is to do all these very good behaviors with good motivations, and then something terrible happens to them. Well, don't think that something terrible is never the result of anything good they've done in this life. That's an impossibility.
I have another question. Doesn't that sort of deny the existence of things like racism, which
No, racism exists.
I know it exists, but what I'm saying is, let's say, take the case of in the American South, the number of African-American people, or at that time, African people, slaves who were lynched.
Yeah.
How can we say that it's because of what they did in past lives, as opposed to evil was inflicted upon them by racist people?
Yep, and so the racist people are the conditions. They're not the substantial cause for their death. Remember last week, the substantial causes, if the people are if the white racists are the substantial causes for the death of this man, they would have to turn into, and they don't.
Yeah, I just have a lot of trouble accepting that whole line of
Yeah,
reasoning.
well, there's an example. We'll go through this and we'll come to this little analogy and see if we can use the analogy to help.
And also, Eddie, it comes back to just what you said before, that of course it's not the person of this life who created the negativity to experience the suffering of racism. So it's not, we're not victim blaming and saying, oh, well, they brought it on themselves. It comes back to, again, that confusion that we have on the nature of a person. And because of that, then we perpetuate this horrible, vicious cycle. But it's certainly not victim blaming. It's just that, of course, if karma was easy, we would have nailed it by now. But it's not as obvious.
And so the sixth point here is to understand that painful feelings and their cause. So the understanding that painful feelings and their causes. I'm sorry. Foundation of all. Understanding painful feelings and their causes is the foundation of all happiness. Yeah, we have to understand this. And it's not easy to understand. Like I said, we've got to bring into this idea of last week's substantial causes and conditioning. And then it's like, then it's past lives, future lives, present life. And it's like, who is the person that's going from one life to another? Who's the creator of this? And we say, well, it's the person who is under control, or the person with the mind. The mind is under the control of karma and delusion. And that's the real creator of the suffering. That's where we've got to sort of look. The person is under the control of karma and delusion. Now, this also, like I've put up here painful feelings, but you could easily put up saying, pleasant feelings are the effect of previously accumulated virtuous karma. So this goes both ways, and this is the certainty of karma. Pleasant feelings arise from compatible causes. Pleasant feelings do not arise from incompatible causes. Now the next one is karma increases. So a small action can produce a large effect. And so here we've got this, like a forest. And then a forest can arise from like one seed of a plant. You get many trees, many plants, all coming from one seed. That's basically what's saying here is small non-virtuous actions can produce great suffering, and small virtuous actions can produce great happiness. So karma is like expandable. So knowing that requires us, to, if we accept that, we can change our behavior, because here's a small action can produce a great effect, whether it's non-virtuous or negative. And I remember this, there's a saying, even in the text, I say, even a drop of water, which is so small, over time will fill a bucket. And it does, right? And when I was living in Red Hill, which is a suburb on the other side of town, I used to watch my tap dripping. And I thought, it doesn't matter, it's just a drop of water. Until the water bill came in. Right? So it was like, oh my God. And I go, whoa, there it is, a tiny little thing, big effect. So it's the same with us, little virtue can produce massive effects, little non-virtue could produce massive effects. So again, just a type of reflection, small non-virtuous actions can produce results of great suffering. From the original action that was the cause, effects can be greatly magnified. in terms of size, amount, intensity, and duration. Because internal causation involves a magnification of effect that is larger than that found in external causation. Even though you get that example of a forest coming from one seed, you know, it's important to be very careful. So you see, a lot of the analogies that the Buddha uses are analogies to do with farming. He just takes things that take place in the external world and says, look, it's very, very similar in your internal world. Miffy?
Yeah, Eddie, there's this amazing movie I just saw called In the Zone of this guy from Chicago that went over to New Zealand. And they have this thing with the school system, whatever region that you're in, then you go to that school. And so he somehow managed to purchase a house in the zone of the very, very best school in New Zealand. And the house he turned into a hostel for disadvantaged Maori boys. So they came from all over New Zealand, you know, they hadn't been going to school at all. Because they were there resident in that suburb, they were able to go to that amazing school. And so just from that one action that he did, then these 50 boys actually graduated school, actually got a degree, stopped, you know, getting into gangs, were able to go back to their communities, the whole thing. And it was just in the space of like 6 or 7 years that it completely changed everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and so we've you know, we find that it's like what's her name? Who's the young girl, Miffy, that did the big climate change? Greta Thunberg?
Greta Thunberg.
You know, so one thing, you decide today I'm not going to school. Just look what happened.
And just look what happened. That's right.
Yeah.
So to not underestimate that the power, and it's
action.
just in a few years.
Yeah. So, you know, both sides here, isn't it? Now, the next characteristic of karma is that, like I've just put, no action, no effect. There's no cause, no effect. Meaning, you cannot experience the effect of an action without first having created its cause. You know, so I was just thinking, you know, it's like sometimes, like you're talking about like racism down south, people becoming lynched, all sorts of terrible things that happen in the world, and you just can't put your finger on why it would be happening. Yeah, no wonder people ask, like why me? But with understanding of karmic causation, you don't need to do that. There can be, you know, if there's no way out here, you can accept. Obviously, I've brought about this result upon myself from some previous life. The tricky thing is here, when we say that, you've got to know who the I is that brought this about. It's not you in this life that did it.
But Eddie, what about when the why me is every single person on the planet who might be, who in fact is suffering from climate change, drought, things related to climate change. Everybody on the planet can experience devastating effects. And so it just defies logic. I don't know how to think about it.
There's so you call that environmental karma. The environment, you know, so the large groups of people experience an effect like climate change.
And it's a collective karma as well, because within climate change, we all are experiencing it, but some are experiencing it worse than others. And then, so there's the collective karma, but then the individual one can be vastly different.
So if you've not created the cause to experience a contagious disease, you don't contract it, even though others around you may. If we do not create the causes to attain awakening, we will not. You know, even though you make many prayers to do it, prayer is just one aspect of it.
So Eddie, like like, you know, Jordan, who went to her work dinner party, 5 of them, and 4 out of the 5 got COVID. So they're all at the same dinner table. And
Yeah,
yet
you
one of
sort of
them
think
didn't
everyone
get
should get
COVID.
it, but one doesn't.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this is something else to recollect, right? No cause, no effect. So this is something also got to bring in. These pleasant results are the effects of past virtuous karma that I created. To experience more of the same, I must recreate their causes. And if it's returned at the negative side, these unpleasant results are the effects of past non-virtuous karma that I created. To experience less, I must deconstruct their causes. I need to do something so it stops. The actions do not go to waste. So in other
Eddie,
words,
just a second before you go on. So that's a really interesting point, because even in amongst experiencing racism or sexism, for instance, there are people that help us or people that stand up for us or that support us. So it's quite a mixed bag anyway. And so any form of help or support that we do get is a result of a virtuous karma, isn't it?
yes,
So
that's right. And so remember here when we talk about karma, especially when it's in relationship with others, that the other person also has karmic material going on, and so do we. If there's 2 sentient beings there, you know, karma is playing its role. So in other words, when you do an action, there's got to be a consequence for it, unless you can interrupt it in some way. And this is the wonderful thing about having the life of a human being right now and being introduced to the Buddha's teachings. We can interrupt it. But if you don't, you know, you think about how many other people don't know about the teachings of karmic cause and effect. The wheel just keeps on rolling. But we do. It's up to us then to stop it for ourselves, at least, to try and contribute to the welfare and happiness of others. So here's this analogy coming up. So karma is definite. This is the first thing we said, right? So this is what's definite about it, or this is what's certain. If you plant cherry seeds, you can only get a cherry tree. You never accidentally get chilies or cars or money growing on the tree, ever. Secondly, is that it expands. The seed develops into much more than just the tree. As you see, the flowers of the tree, the fruit, the shade, the wood, the leaves, more trees. It provides homes. It can, it's like chairs, tables, paper, ships, all sorts of. It just massive, right? From this, small thing. So we've got to do more than, the no result without the cause. Now you'll see in one of the other classes coming up, what an action is. An action is actually made up of parts. Right? In fact, all the phenomena that exist are made up of parts. So here, like praying could be one part of it, but it's not enough. We need to actually act. This is what this thing about karma is about. This is praying is an action for sure, but it's not the substantial cause to have the plant. And lastly, once an action is done, like I said, the result is inevitable. The consequence is inevitable when all the other conditions come into play. Now, this one here, you got to remember, it's like, so it doesn't mean that every time I do an action, I'm definitely going to experience the result. The answer is no. That is not definite. It's sort of saying if nothing is done and the conditions ripen, you will definitely get the effect. You see, like this one here, right? When you first put the cherry seed in, and it gets something, you think, wow, I'm going to get a cherry tree with all my cherries on it. This is fantastic. Is that inevitable? What do you say, folks?
In my
Is it inevitable?
case, that's not
It's
inevitable.
not inevitable, is it? You know, the frost
No.
could come. An animal could eat the plant when it was just very, very small. All sorts of things can hinder it. But if nothing does, if nothing hinders it, this cherry seed will definitely produce a shrub with cherries on it.
Yeah, so if all the conditions are there, you can't say, no, cherry seed, don't grow, don't grow.
That's right.
But you have to have all the conditions.
Okay, so now we have a look at this, the one with the, so this is saying, if the effects of a performed action doesn't go to waste, right, then the result is inevitable. So let's have a look at that. So to stop previous actions producing their result, you can apply the 4 opponent powers. Because like I said, every action is made up of parts. The 4 opponent powers are the parts that are in contradistinction to the action, the parts of the action. They oppose every part of the action. And that's how you can stop actions producing their fruit. So that's like the method. Right? But you can also apply wisdom to look at how are we seeing this action, this thing called karma. And you'll see that it's appearing to you as if it truly exists. It's either it truly exists or it doesn't exist at all. And both are the two extremes. So if you can apply wisdom to it, you can whack out those two extremes. And finally, so this is on the negative side, right? This is for the negative side. On the positive side, in terms of virtue, what could stop it? Well, anger, hatred, and also the other wrong views you might have. So I remember this, like when I came across this in the Buddhist texts, one of the things that happened to me, so I remember like the anger I had towards my parents, or the way they brought me up, the different things they did. And what it did, it destroyed my recollection, my memory of anything good that they had done to me. So when I came across this, I went, oh my God, that's how it actually works. Because I remember trying to think back something good that mum or dad had done, and I couldn't. It took me a long time and a lot of effort to think, oh, yeah, the fact they even bought me up, they didn't just leave me and abandon me altogether. They bought me shoes, they sent me to school, they put meals on the table, all these things. But because I was so angry at them, like I'd forgotten all that. And that's what it says, that anger destroys the virtue of a long time. So I have that experience, and you might too. If you've ever been really upset with somebody, if they've ever done anything good, that just doesn't, it takes a lot of effort to recreate its appearance.
And
then,
Eddie,
of course,
it also means that even if it's not about them, anger destroys your own capacity for happiness, because when your mind's filled with anger or hatred, you can't enjoy anything at all, even the things that you love.
Yeah, and so like when you can reflect back on the kindness of your parents, you can generate gratitude for them. And gratitude is a virtuous mental factor. But it's not available to you if you're angry. So the causes for your own happiness become unavailable to you. And this is also like with the wrong views. Like Susan brought up, the idea of racism. You have this is the wrong view. So whatever good qualities the people you don't like, they're not available to you. So they hinder your own happiness. So in both sides, so which is sort of like, this is good news for us. On both sides, it's changeable. In fact, the Buddha said, possessed of my own deeds, I am the inheritor of deeds, kin to deeds, one who has deeds as a refuge. Whatever deeds I shall do, whether good or evil, I shall become the heir of it. So, to make sort of sense of this, I was saying before, Sue, we've got to sort of look at this thing of what they call beginningless mind, beginningless rebirths. That's going to lead us to discover like who is being reborn, how do they exist. There's the actions themselves. So there's a lot to sort of comprehend and work through to sort of try and make sense of karmic causality, and then to use it in our lives. And I think, from my perspective, at least, it removes a lot of the confusion, like you say, Sue, about like, so why do bad things happen to good people? Why does it seem like the bad people, get away with so much? Like it doesn't seem to make sense, does it? When you just look at the world in terms of one lifetime, like the lifetime we're in. But when we look at it through the lens of karma, I think then it becomes much more workable for us and much more understandable. Even though in the beginning, it requires a major shift of mind here. And it is a major shift. Because like the Buddha's sort of saying, like the troubles aren't coming from out there. They contribute to our trouble, but they're not the major factor. The major factor is the mind being under control of karma and delusion. That's where our suffering is arising from. Yet it can be brought to an end. And if we find ourselves as human beings with the leisure and opportunity to put it to an end, it's a good idea to start making an attempt to do that. Anyway, so what's our takeaway for today as we've come to the end of our class? We know what these 4 principles are. I'm not kidding here, it's going to take you years to get you to implement this. In fact, I remember once being with a group of Sangha members and somebody asked them the question, like, what did they think was the major thing to take away from the teachings of the Buddha? So, so straight away my head goes, dependent arising. But the monk said, karma. And I was sort of like shocked. I go, karma? And then you sort of realize, well, karma is also a dependent arising. It's not outside dependent arising. It's an instance of it, And unless you get your head around about what's creating the suffering, what's creating the happiness, that's about karma. Karma, cause and effect. Virtue and non-virtue. There's a great deal of power for us as individuals if we can understand this and put this into effect. Like I was saying, we want to be happy, yet we do everything that causes our own unhappiness. We actually work against ourselves. Like what's going on here? This is well, we don't understand the principles of karma. We wish to be free of suffering, yet we embrace it as if it's our dearest friend. Like again, what's going on here? Now the answer is basically we don't know how it works, but we could do. It's no longer hidden from us. It's there in plain view. It's just going to take a bit of time for us to integrate it and start acting on it. So we know these 4 principles, and we know this analogy of the seed and the tree. Believe me, this analogy is really, really useful. When you look at your own suffering, like the substantial causes are not out there. So please, it does take time. There's no doubt about it. And to integrate the knowledge and even just to understand it. But we are humans, we have the intelligence. If we have the time, please use it. Become happier, more useful, more productive, less troublesome to yourself and others. Next week, we're going to look at the karma and its different paths, and we'll look at these different karmic paths. And the result of, you've got to ask yourself, what's the point of doing this? The answer is because it brings results, future results or future effects of either more suffering or less suffering and greater happiness. I do hope this has been useful to you. And every time when I do this, I thought, okay, it's not so difficult today as like last week. But who am I kidding? It's not easy. So let's, you guys have all stayed with us. Let's dedicate what we've done to achieving enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. So using our understanding of karmic causation, laying down what causes suffering and adopting everything that causes greater happiness and produces more virtue. So due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. And may the supreme jewel, bodhicitta, not yet born, arise and grow, and may that born have no decline, but increase forevermore, such as long as space abides, as long as sentient beings abide, we too will abide to help them dispel their suffering. Okay, so thank you once again, everybody.
Just stop the screen share. So we can see you. Oh, there you are.
Create a little more virtue, say all stay alive till next week. Enhance your virtue, decrease your non-virtue. And I really do hope I see you all again next week, and we keep on with our path and try and work in accordance with karmic cause and effect. Okay.
Thank
we'll
you
see
so much.
then.